We're going to get into it. So I got to calm down here. So
Why?
I don't know. I guess I'm going all right.
Should we have a 5-minute sit first?
No, we'll take it as we come. So let's get on with the guests here. I'll make a brief introduction before I go on and on and on and on. I'm here with Wendy Kallins, over here on my right. And Wendy, you are, last time I spoke to you, you are head of...
I'm president of Sustainable Marin.
Thought so. And that sounds...
Among the many things that I do.
Sounds like a beautiful notion and a lovely idea and a beautiful county, and it's, yeah, very good. And Robert, well, tell me about yourself. What are you doing?
Sure. Well, I've been doing sustainability and systems change work for about 25 years in the solar and renewable energy industry for 15 years.
Wow.
And now doing more independent climate consulting work with my own little consultancy.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. All right. Over here on my left, I'm thinking of a song.
On the far left.
My friend Sierra Salin, man about town, good for anything, good for nothing.
Yeah, I'm the head of Homeland Insecurity.
You got the job. Okay.
Homeland Insecurity, I like it.
So how do we...
I would add to my resume that I'm very involved in green transportation. I founded Safe Routes to Schools, and I serve on the MTC Citizens Advisory Council and on Drawdown Marin's Transportation Committee, and I'm sure Robert and I will get to talking more about Drawdown Marin.
Now, were you are you speaking for Drawdown Marin, or was that?
I am.
None of us are speaking.
Not really.
For.
We all are, but none of us is an official spokesman per se, which is part of the nature of the initiative, which is much more of a collaborative, community-based initiative. But there is organization and structure to this initiative as well.
Well, do you already have an organization? Do you already have a body of people who are
involved in working? Yeah.
What happened is that Robert and I and a number of other sustainability activists and solar
climate champions
people met for 2 years hammering out a framework of how can we address reducing our carbon footprint here in Marin County in a more systemic and collective way rather than a bunch of individual actions. And we came up with the framework, and then the County of Marin has now hired a sustainability coordinator who is now implementing the framework that we came up with.
Yeah.
all right.
Wendy?
Tell me again. Marin County. Who is involved with it from the county? What has he done?
So it's the county of the Marin County itself has hired a staff person.
What department of Marin County?
Community development.
Community development. Interesting.
Yeah. Part of the sustainability team.
Right. So they've hired Drawdown Marin already?
Well, they've hired a staffer to actually help implement, as Wendy said, sort of the initiative as we've designed it.
Oh, interesting.
And so what that means, more specifically, is primarily there's 6 broad strategy areas or focus areas. Transportation, as Wendy mentioned, renewable energy, buildings and infrastructure, regenerative agriculture of food systems, carbon sequestration and healthy ecosystems, which you might like, and what we're calling climate resilient communities. So those are the 6 broad strategic areas. And then we had this question that was more along the lines of, if we need to do sort of a whole kind of system-wide dramatic transformation of our county to both address the threats and the opportunities, which are considerable actually, economic and social opportunities. How would we do that? What would that actually look like? And how would we do it in a way that's not top-down, it's not all grassroots, it's kind of inside-out, collaborative and all that.
You said it's not all top-down.
Yeah.
And then you said it's not all grassroots.
And it's not all grassroots. So it's not activist.
So you're actually,
It's top down, bottom up.
So education.
So you actually,
inside out.
So you're not all top down, which just means the people who are whatever on the floor, but you're not all from the top either.
Yeah.
So you're developing it from your own group of, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
is
thought
this a,
leaders, climate champions, sustainability advocates.
see,
yeah,
I see.
and some county
And
staffers
other
as
people
well.
too.
Yeah.
It's not just the
Yeah.
usual suspects.
right?
And we're discussing what are the best, you know, strategies we can use within the framework of our
County.
working group that we can recommend. And then there's going to be a steering committee that's going to juggle it all and try to come up with, you
Well,
know,
it's,
where
how
our focus is
much,
going to be and where are we going to put our resources.
Yeah.
And where
Well,
are
how
the
much-
biggest gains going to be in Marin? Is it going to be in transportation and just overall consumerism as opposed to agriculture? I mean, just because of the size
None of that
the...
has been decided.
It's a great question. You know, as we have envisioned this, and you know, I don't entirely want to speak on behalf of many people's, you know, wisdom and intelligence, but you know, my sense of collectively was sort of a shared understanding that all of these strategic areas are important. They all represent a significant slice of the climate solution, whether it's either reducing emissions like renewable energy and transportation can help do, or whether it's actually pulling atmospheric carbon, you know, out of the atmosphere and sequestering it and really reintegrating it into the ecosystem, into the soil, into the biomass,
all right, well, all right, let's
things like that.
go a couple of questions. I'm sorry, Sierra, I found this fascinating, and it's all kind of brand new
It's our own little
information to
Green
me.
New Deal.
Sorry for what?
So, I mean, huh?
Don't be sorry. There's nothing to be sorry for.
Cool.
We're not blowing your mind,
Sure,
are
I
you?
should not even talk to Sierra. I have to keep my mind focused. So, once again, what was the outreach like to bring because is it a done deal now? You say you already are being hired?
Yeah,
or somebody?
so really it's a very collaborative, innovation-oriented initiative. So there's sort of a fairly straightforward structure to this sort of, imagine it more like a network than a top-down hierarchical organization. It's sort of a network model where we have these working groups. They're populated with roughly 10 to 20 people, you know, mostly subject matter experts and or local champions in some way or another, and primarily Marin, but also a little broader field. We've got some folks from the East Bay, some from San Francisco, some from Sonoma. And the idea is to really look at the problems deeply enough that we come up with some really innovative solutions. And we're drawing from a lot of expertise elsewhere. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. And thankfully, the book Drawdown Marin, not Drawdown Marin, but the book Drawdown from Paul Hawken and company has already done us a huge favor, which has come up with a list of 80 kind of proven solutions for addressing climate change, plus 20 additional kind of what they call coming attractions or innovative ideas that
They're all
aren't fully proven but have a lot of
guaranteed
potential.
to work?
Yeah, not quite. Those aren't guaranteed. Those last 20.
All right.
Carbon
Well, everybody
project.
has ideas.
So what we're trying to do, back to Sierra's point, is we've taken that 100 solutions and said, well, what are some of the best ones that we think will work most appropriately in Marin, in our context and our situation as a Mediterranean climate that's, you know, in a fairly affluent community that fortunately is 2/3 protected land, but a third is, you know, pretty intensive consumer.
We don't have a
use.
real lot of acreage compared to like the big farming communities and...
Yeah. Well, maybe. That's still an
We
open
have the
question.
same
Yeah.
animal
Well, the
golf.
Marin Carbon Project, I mean, there's a lot that can be done sequestering carbon.
Exactly, yeah. So even if it's not your classic flat agricultural land, right?
And I think that's the other thing between all these different working groups, what we're hoping for is a lot of cross-pollination.
Yes.
Because, you know, you can talk about clean energy then fueling electric cars and, you know, sustainable agriculture doing carbon sequestration. So there's a lot of
Crossover.
integration that should happen.
And how do you get people to change our own personal habits?
Exactly.
That's the...
Well, you know,
Yes.
I think we have to go to the next level because to get people to change personal habits, you need to switch the culture itself. So if the culture shifts, then the individual habits follow along with it. And of course, this is the model we used with Safe Routes to Schools. Is we worked on changing the culture of the school so that driving your kids to school was not the cool thing to do anymore. And once it no longer became cool, then individual habits would start changing to try to align themselves with the culture.
Yeah.
So it's a systemic look at things rather than everybody doing their own individual. Well, I've got my electric car and I've got my solar panels on my house, so I've done my bit.
Well, but it does come down to the individual's habits and consuming habits and what we throw in our trash cans. I mean, it adds up every little bit. I mean, there's policy and regulation or whatever, but how to re-educate our own habits is the resistance.
I think the key is the adds up. If everybody's just kind of doing their own thing, then it doesn't add up. It's the multiplier effect we're looking for.
But if they're all doing their own thing and it happens to be something everybody else is doing, then it feels even more. You don't need to be. People don't need to be told what to do really, or pushed what to do. I don't think it's just we're just in such a vacuum of leadership. I mean, on this planet, just of somebody. I think me and Sierra have been talking about this. I think the world is for a long time. Just like saying, well, why not do a few things it's like just. I'm thinking some of my examples I'm thinking of is the crisis with water 4 years ago with the drought. And somehow with a combination of the governor saying stuff and they were
ago with the drought
right, but they asked people to cut back. And from my browsing the articles, it was successful. It was quite successful by a number that was almost 30%, which meant people's individual habits were, and just by mostly, I guess maybe there were some penalties involved with the water districts too, but it worked. So anyways,
actually on that point, I just want to say it was completely voluntary for Marin because we have our own water supply. We were not actually obligated to reduce our water consumption, but fortunately, a lot of people heard the governor's call, and they responded anyway.
And people remembered and had done it before in 76, 74.
Actually, we were a lot better in the 70s.
Well, it's interesting. It's still kind of to me, it's fascinating that the working group, to me, stays invisible or interesting. I mean, I haven't seen any signs like in Fairfax saying invitations to come be part of a drawdown experience.
We started meeting in January. We don't even have our framework yet. We don't even have our projects yet. It's 2 years out.
All right, and
well, hopefully not quite 2 years.
It's yes.
So the idea is there's sort of these smaller sort of like incubator teams in a way coming up with solutions, but they're really, where we've designed this. Their charge really is to kind of sketch out what they believe it should be based on their own expertise and drawing from a lot of other sources, and then to actually present it to an executive steering committee as well as getting input from the community in certain kinds of initiatives. Depends on the kind of solution. For example, if it's around adoption of EVs, you driving EVs, even though, again, that's a very individualistic thing, but there's also a very communal element to it. And right now, some of the work that's being done is to research how do you motivate people to actually get into, to purchase an EV. At that inflection point where they're thinking about a new vehicle, do I buy a new car? Do I buy an internal combustion engine car? Or do I buy one of these cool EVs? I can't afford the Tesla necessarily, but what are my options here? So there's research being done, kind of social research being done by the group that's heading that up. Cool the Earth and Drive Clean Marin, which is also a part of Drawdown Marin. It's sort of this network idea, right? This kind of overlapping connections here. And they're really digging into this question, how do you really change the behavior but also change the culture at the same time and make it cool, interesting, appealing, and the neighbors are doing it.
Put a bookmark under culture, okay? For a second, just for bookmark culture. We'll come back.
Let's
we'll get back to culture.
Yeah. So there's going to be this. The point is, there's going to be sort of as these solutions develop, there's going to be sort of this evolving process where more and more people will be involved in both the refining the solutions and implementing them, and also modifying them, because the other part of it with our community stakeholder group, which is actually a community partnership group. Is to really get feedback. It's kind of just not just here, go implement these ideas, but what do you think about them? How do we improve them? Or let's
Robert,
go try them.
How many campaigns like this have you been on in your life? view, to like taking a group and representing it, and with a bigger plan for the community, and then bringing it to the community successfully and having the community endorse it. Is this your first one?
First, yeah. I've done a lot of work in our organizations, doing organizational and systems change work, but not in the public domain per se.
Yeah, all right, because I'm just coming from a place where I feel like I've seen a few of these plans over the years that remind me of this improvement for the south part of San Anselmo Avenue, and I'm kind of cringing already that it's like, it's got such a sense of officialness, but yet it is already going to be presenting its strategy. Or, you said there'll be lots of room for people to
Participate
add feedback.
and feedback, yeah.
But the tendency for people, if something's already coming down the pike, is maybe they'll grab onto it. Maybe the publicity will be just perfect and everybody will go, yeah, yeah. Or maybe there'll be some pushback, like, what?
Well,
Because I don't seem like
my experience, because I have done that, I did this with Safe Routes to Schools. We developed a program, we put it in the schools. It's the same top down, bottom up kind of approach. What we found is people like a framework. You give them a framework and then let them be creative within that framework. And what we found is we'd come in and we'd actually say, here's the contest and here's the materials for your contest. And most of the schools would just take our materials and do our contest. And one or two schools would say, well, we're going to do this. We're going to have we're going to add to the contest a walk and bike across America, and we're going to combine it with our geography lessons, and do something more. And then we'd see what this school was up to and said, well, that's great. We're going to take that, absorb it into our program, offer it to other people if they want to do it, and then it becomes part of the program. So, there's nothing wrong with developing a framework. You have to have a container. If it's just kind of mush.
Structureless,
Yeah, structureless, then what you have is mush. So you create a container. Within the container, you let there be a lot of freedom.
Yeah, and people don't have to participate if they don't want to. I mean, it's not.
No, but
there's no mandates in this.
But the only thing then, if they don't participate, the whole concept of drawdown is supposed to be the roots, the ecology of a community. And if you get half the people who feel like it has in any way restrictive, or even has a vision of being restrictive, let's just say, maybe it'd be a good idea for all of Marin to be, somebody has a big idea, EVA free within 5 years. Well, maybe that sounds real noble. Is that the kind of, people might not go for that.
Are you sensing sort of more like that there's going to be a lot of kind of top-down, thou shalt kind of mandates? Is that what you
kind of feel it already? I feel like,
you're kind of
whoa.
responding in the same way that people are responding to the New Deal. And for all the audience at home, this is the New Deal.
Yeah.
I mean, the Green New Deal.
Right.
And already you've got right-wing pundits saying they're going to force you to stop eating meat, and you're going to have to all ride bicycles.
No more hamburgers.
No more hamburgers, and you can't ride in a plane anymore. Anybody who actually reads this will know there's absolutely nothing in here that says anything of the kind.
It's not a bill. It's not a legal bill.
No, it's a framework.
It's just some ideas.
And so is drawdown.
So you can't just vote on nobody's going to vote on the ideas. They'll have to bring up a bill, and there can be, even though how wonderful that might seem with its ideas, when you put the details down, it has to stand the test of.
So, Guy, are you looking at
scrutiny.
this as like policy and regulation? I'm
looking at just the same way this other thing in my mind, with you got 16 candidates running around saying, like me, and here's this new deal, but once again, who did they consult?
What's the buy-in?
Where was the people? What's their vision?
For me, it all goes to education. I mean, for example, you can take like a light bulb, and how much skin does it take to turn off a light when you're not in the room? Which one light bulb's still no big deal, but when you get in like Diablo Canyon or Hanford or some nuclear power plant, one light, LEDs are better, but it doesn't take any energy to turn a light bulb off when you're leaving your room. And some of us will look at a light bulb burning, and like to us, it's a nuclear power plant or all the waste, and to other people, it's just light. But in order to change people's habits, it comes down to education, because if you don't make the connection about, oh, it's not just, growing on trees, so to speak, that there's a cost to it, you're only going to want to save or preserve like the natural environment if there's a reason to, or if you can see the reason to do it.
Yeah, connecting the dots.
Without there having a visceral or an actual reason for yourself, it's like, why do it? It's like, it's just, it's.
Well, even the connection thing too.
But I can afford it. I've got $50 or I've got $500 million. It's like, so what? What do I want to turn off a light bulb for? Or what do I want to save the soil for? Or what do I want to do drawdown? Or why do I want to buy an electric car? I mean, for me, it all comes down to, it's like, how do I be satisfied with what I got and not have to consume a bunch of stuff? And kind of build from there, rather than I need all this stuff to be happy or something.
No,
I think the genuine concern that you're bringing up, which we had when the government kind of said, okay, we're going to do this now,
Right.
is there's a tendency for government to kind of bureaucratize everything.
And mandate.
And there has to be policy shifts. We want there to be policy shifts. But I think for the Green New Deal and for Drawdown Marin to actually be effective, there has to be the ability for local communities to find their own way to implement things. Going back to my Safe Routes example, that when you give people enough freedom and creativity, you will find there were ways that you hadn't thought of. If you just let the bureaucrats make all the decisions and then impose them, then yes, you will end up with the nightmare scenario that you're talking about, where people will resist being told what to do. If we create a framework where people have the ability to be creative, then I think we can have some amazing things happen.
Could you read a little bit about what the Green New Deal even is? Because I think a lot of people have no idea what it actually is even. It's like you hear about the Green New Deal, but what is it?
What is it? Well,
Read it. The first preamble.
It starts out by saying we're in trouble. Here's all the reasons we're in trouble and why we have to do something.
All right, it's a resolution. It's not a bill for anybody at home.
Yes.
It's just a resolution that doesn't have an act of law behind it.
And it combines both the environmental issues and the economic issues that we are confronting. Stagnant wages.
And Dianne Feinstein has it handled, and the kids don't know anything, or.
Yeah, that was a very edited video. But aside from that, what Feinstein proposed was some concrete things that could be ways of implementing this. Most of which were, fairly conservative ideas. So it goes through all the whereases. Then it goes into the resolved. By page 5, you're in the resolved. And it's essentially saying, we have to get together just like we had to get together in World War II and in the Depression. It's taking those two examples and saying we can mobilize as a nation and as a global community to do these things. And interestingly enough, they come up with the same
Kinds of strategies.
areas of strategies that have to do with, net zero greenhouse gas emissions, infrastructure, clean air and water, promote
Lots of
justice.
things.
So
Lots of things.
It's not just another form of socialism?
No, it's not even that, Sierra.
No,
It's more complicated than that.
It does require collective effort. but
It's more complicated than that.
I mean, I'm just,
I know.
you know what I'm getting at. and-
Yes.
Yeah, but it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, but how
It
to,
basically says we have to look at how we're doing things, and instead of being a oil-based, carbon fuel-based economy, we want to be a clean energy economy. And as that changes things, it's going to create more jobs and more opportunity and resolve some of the economic issues that we're dealing with as well.
I'm just looking at
and
how do we
lifestyles.
communicate that so that all sides get that without bickering about, oh, you just want socialism or you're
Socialism,
taking
yeah.
something away from
Well-
me. And how do we educate or change the paradigm so that, one, people can understand it, and two, they're actually, yeah, I can get on board with this.
Hey, let me have another option
this
here
is-
too.
yeah.
And the other option is to understand what the socialism, quote, is, to be able to use your mind to evaluate whether is it going to be something that's sweet and graceful like Social Security. you just put some money in, you get it back, it's beautiful? Or is it a grander level that, well, here, for instance, here's one. And this is in the whereas, so I think they're talking about community stuff, but it says F, ensuring the use of democratic and participatory processes that are inclusive of and led by frontline and vulnerable communities and workers to plan, implement, and administer the Green New Deal mobilization at the local level. Now, in a couple of different ways, this strikes me as strange, and I'm not saying anything like socialism. It's just what it is. It says basically they're talking about making plans for communities, ensuring the use of democratic and participatory processes that are inclusive of and led by frontline and vulnerable communities. Now, the definition of frontline, I think, means, what does it mean? It means sort of like you're also vulnerable? Is it like
well, I think what that says to me is, for example, around here, it'd be like low-lying areas that are starting to get impacted already by global warming and water. If you're living in an impacted area and the water level's coming up 2 feet.
What I'm questioning is,
what
I'm questioning why, if they're being the ones to lead, then somebody else is apparently going to have to follow. And so if somebody's making these decisions, who's going to make the decision? Oh, San Anselmo, you're not a frontliner in a vulnerable community. We've got this greater plan for your benefit because it's not socialism, George. It's just a little complicated. Green New Deal mobilization at the local level.
I think some of this is actually, I would say, it fits into there's some certain language.
Who's mobilizing who to do what?
Yeah,
I am lazy.
There's certain language here around social justice that is really trying to help all of society, help certain communities develop their own agency around, kind of positively impacting their own future. So I don't think this is necessarily prescribing that frontline communities are going to be deciding what the solutions are for everybody and then dictating what those solutions are. I think it's basically saying those communities that are feeling vulnerable. I mean, you could say, for example, communities like in the North Bay, in Sonoma County or Napa County or up in Paradise, those were our frontline communities, and they should have a lot of say in how their community is either protected or rebuilt, right? And they have a lot of say in how that should go, preferably in ways that are more resilient and more economically advantageous to that community, rather than.
I think that's a very interesting issue these days.
I think that you also, it's who is not making decisions, and who is making the decisions now, because right now decisions are being made by multinational corporations and imposing those decisions on these communities.
I disagree.
And it's not worded very well because all communities are frontline communities, really.
I disagree. Tell me again, you said that people are making their decisions, big
corporations
are I wish I could play back the tape at this moment, but we must recognize the power to resist bullshit, and it's just.
I would say, all right.
We have a responsibility.
Louisiana.
We're not innocent.
Louisiana, very red Louisiana.
Yeah.
Petrochemical capital of America. They're living in just unbelievable devastation from the power that is imposed on them by the petrochemical industries that are literally poisoning their water and devastating their communities, and they're helpless to do anything about it. And yet, they still want to say those people should have more power than any kind of regulatory agency.
Wait a minute, those people
The people who live in Louisiana who are suffering from the pollution would rather have these corporations have all this power
than give it up themselves?
Than have any kind of federal government come in and regulate them.
Well, I think that most people,
It's
country
scary.
people across America and the world, and you dig down into a lot of countries, and pretty soon your real defensive, the most defensive people are the ones who are, nuts,
Rich.
blowing up things. But everybody is entitled and is actually, everybody's got a little bit of, hey, this is my community. I like it the way it is. How are communities, how is sustainability created? Maybe it is the sum total of individual lives. Maybe it really is. And that by trying to nudge or prod, we're still not trusting in people. And if people realized how important it was to act even a little bit more, which I think they do. I think we don't realize, even to this day, I think many people, even like with the checkout line at the Safeway, will come in and tell me things like, I just didn't want to put these in plastic, I mean, people...
I think, Guy, what you're saying is that what is posed to the people in Louisiana is a false dichotomy. That either you got to give the power to the corporation or you give the power to the federal government. I think what this is trying to say, and maybe we're not reading it right, is that people in their communities should have more power to make more decisions about what happens in their own community.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And that, I think, is the framework they're trying to set up here, is to give more power to the individual communities
I misheard.
who are most affected.
I thought you were saying that they were not ones, they were being... They
No.
needed a voice because their voice wasn't heard through the corporations.
Well, it's a both and thing. I think they're not heard through the corporations, and if you have too much imposition from the federal government, you're not going to get your local creative solutions that you need.
Yeah, tailored to the local community.
Ultimately, it has to be a local decision. And by the way, just going back to Sierra's question of how you're going to get people to buy into that, 70% of people are already buy into it. So, it's only the
70% of people are already the Green New
who
Deal.
have been polled about what they think about the Green New Deal, not knowing anything about
Exactly.
it. They just like
They
the
don't know
idea of
anything.
it.
Of
I like
course,
the-
it's an
sounds good.
emotional thing. It's like,
Sounds good.
So
You
once
know.
you've got that emotional hook in, you're already partway there already.
well, that's what many people think and many people hope.
Yeah.
But, we got to cut through this sense of, to me, these external solutions being what we're looking for in life. And we really, I know you're going to give a positive vote for this.
No.
No, he's just going to make you laugh.
It's something, to me, there's something about freedom and ecology. Nature in its wildness, humans in their more intractable qualities. I do not think that the people of Louisiana or Tennessee or anywhere else in the country need to have decisions made for them. I think they have good judgment. And even if they vote for somebody like Trump, they have their good reasons to vote for Trump. And if they're anywhere like me, maybe, I'm sorry, I hope to be making it still live through the summer. I think the man is a human and he is trying. And there's many things that he's done so far I think is great. And I think one of the most environmentally damaging things that have taken place to this country. And God bless every beautiful human who's here, been here, will be here at all times. But the stress of too much humanity can pretty much be traced back to 1980 and Bush and Reagan when they jumped up even legal immigration from 300,000 a year to almost 1 million, which has been going on now for 30 years. And it puts stress, it creates a housing crisis, and we simply aren't required to do that. Yes, the world's full of people, but actually a lot of populations are dropping everywhere. As a matter of fact, there's a book that says that's a fear. So to me, America, all the quote deplorables and racists, and I've got to tell you what, and I'm sure there's a share of them, but there's a lot of people who are just like, this community is not like I remembered it. And it's not about color, it's about congestion. It's about loss of freedom in different levels. And so that's what I'm just trying to say for
Are you
the
saying that the reason that's there is because we have immigration?
reason we have what?
Do we have congestion because of immigrants?
We have taken in, if we had kept at the rates back in the 1980s that we started out, it would probably have been almost 15 to 20 million less immigrants. And what I am suggesting is not, oh, thank God, that they should be gone immediately, I'd like to wipe it out. I'm just suggesting to you, if you look at the world of freedom, the beauty of travel, the access to nature, and nature not being taxed, monarch butterflies flowing and living, you didn't have this coating of the hills of developments all across America. And it's all about people.
I really think it's a big stretch to say that's all about immigration.
It's policy and regulation, and it's just basic human interactions.
No, but the thing is, when you get, you can't
The
deny.
truth of it is, before we closed the borders, people would come here, work, and then they'd go back home again.
Of course, and we had a Bracero program as well.
Yeah, so they,
But-
you know.
But the question is, I guess if you're saying to dismiss that notion that it's an environmental issue.
And the reality is, we have the population and the humans here. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to?
Well, I think we should start from square one, not go, I don't need to go back in the past or whatever, but just to suggest that drawdown has to do, to me, with becoming more humbler, keeping our footprint lower, having communities not more congested, but more room to breathe. Actually, I met Paul Hawken once at the old Good Earth, and Paul Hawken was connected, you know a little bit about his history, wasn't he connected with the East-West Journal, or maybe that's an aside.
Smith and Hawken and Erewhon Foods.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going on. All right, somebody else.
Well, I want to come back to something that you brought up a couple times as a theme, which I think is important, which is it seemed like you have some fear about drawdown or even the Green New Deal, that it is sort of an imposition of some kind of order and not allowing people to kind of make their own choices and have their own agency. And I would say that the approach of drawdown is really what we would consider a network model, effectively, as I said earlier. And the idea of the network is that not only do a lot of communities and individuals have a lot of say and influence over how they implement these ideas, but it really is mimicking more of an ecological model. What we're finding is that the more, and this is kind of true of kind of a lot of healing modalities, the better able, a lot of healing happens when you actually help reconnect things that have been disconnected, right? So people away from nature.
Obey laws?
What's that?
Something was being mandated, right? You were talking about
Mandates,
putting some
yeah.
laws that will help put structure, as you're saying.
Well,
on
no,
the
just
drawdown.
more. No, I think the idea was just having more of an organizing structure with this network model, with the idea that a lot of these ideas are not being dictated by the government. They're being generated by people in the community, right? And they're going to be evolved and implemented by people in the community, and people can choose to accept them or not. But it really is an ecological kind of ethos that we're trying to create here. The idea is people talking to each other more, working in a little bit more of a coordinated fashion.
It's a mobilization.
Yeah.
It's a mobilization of energy based on the fact that we actually have a real emergency as opposed to a faux emergency. And the real emergency is that life on this planet will become uninhabitable if we keep
Very
going
soon.
doing what we're doing.
For humans.
Well, no,
And a lot of other species,
but-
right?
other species,
but the
we're
pla-
taking
but
we're taking them all down with
We're
us.
changing it all. The planet will continue on. There'll be some form of life that grows back in the cracks.
True.
And
True.
I like to,
Yeah,
I like to say, Wendy, it's like no matter what, we could actually be green rather than greeny green, and we could take care of each other and the environment and do everything right. And the sun's still going to burn out, and we're still going to get hit by a stray comet now and then. So it's like no matter what, we're still not in control of it all.
Right.
So
It's
I mean,
true.
we can do our best, certainly, but don't take it too seriously is I think what I'm trying to say.
Well, I
Yeah.
think the way you articulate it, I want to kind of hand it to you on that, when you talk about how we live our lives, and is this really how we want to be living our lives? Are we really happy being stuck in traffic and driving around in our individual automobiles, which is the only form of transportation that we're really
Most of
allowed
us,
right now? And you know, you talk about this a lot.
Public transit exists.
It doesn't work. We
very
don't have a
well.
working
It's
transit
inefficient.
system
Yeah.
in this county.
Not unless you live right on the freeways and you work right on the freeways.
Yeah.
Or you live in the cities. Yeah.
Or if you have a short walk, which is good for your health.
That's great. Yeah, true.
Yeah. But, again, you talk a lot about, we throw away our trash, not thinking where our trash goes.
Or where it comes from.
Or where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And just, we live a lifestyle that we cling to that actually doesn't make us happy.
And it's our lifestyles really are all about money and paying the bills. And we do things, we like create our lives and our lifestyles around.
I think
Too many of us don't make the choice to like not have the income or to only take a job that's where we live. Instead, we think somehow it's like, oh, I have to commute 3 hours because I need to make this money, or I have to have this job, or I'm not willing to pump
Or a
gas
certain
instead
house,
and live in a cardboard box. I mean, that's kind of the choices we make. And especially around here where everything costs, $1.3 million, I joke and say it's every waking dollar. And if you're not focusing on every waking dollar, you're not in our community.
Sure. We have to touch base on the power of music. It is a bonding nucleus frequently for what people can begin to perceive of as community. It has happened, is happening, does happen.
Universal language music.
Universal language. Now, does it have any practical role in the world affairs?
All depends on your point of
Maybe,
view and how
maybe
you
not.
define practical.
I personally think there should be more music in the parks all through the summer, every Sunday. I think Sunday should be a day for people to go slow and have a car-free day and as much as possible
I
a
love
do-nothing day.
And how do people in the meantime that have these huge mortgages and bills, how do they get by? How do they pay their mortgages or the bills, or how do they get to their job in the city and get back to pick up their kids? And I mean,
I'm glad you're worrying about them, but let me explain.
Well,
this.
no,
Of course,
but
it's very
it comes
simple.
down to money and making a living and
No,
being in
no.
a community. Well, how do you?
Sierra,
It
here,
sounds like
the
both are
solution is
important.
very interesting.
Where
easy.
are all the hippies that used to live here, and why have they all moved to Portland and other places?
Sierra, one
because
more
they want to
thing
have
here.
a life that's
We're
not.
probably
I
into
don't
part
think
two.
they've all
No,
moved away.
No, one more thing here,
No,
in
but-
terms of making that absence. You think in the culture here, the thing of it is that absence is not true at all. There's people. It's a brand new of people we don't even know. Of course, the fire is still alive, very strong. For community, for coming together.
Where's
And
everybody between 18 and 40?
the thing of it is, people don't know.
They're coming back.
People, and I'm one of them. It's almost like the world has gotten too harsh. It's like you can't slow down. There's this traffic everywhere. It's like, where is this? Just a little bit of sense of peace
Yeah,
to come together.
Yeah.
And for me, like it would be a piece of, if I say I might just vote for Trump next year, everybody can do what they want, but I personally would just like to not be spit upon or be told I'm a Nazi sympathizer or people raise their eyebrows. The sense of contempt we have right now for both sides of the argument, from the either or the or, is it's very painful. There's a conservative perspective that should be acknowledged without being said to be racist. It's not.
I think there's a difference between the conservative perspective and the extremist perspectives, just as there's a difference between the liberal
we're all
perspective
individuals. When are we going to?
Who are the antifas? There's the alt-right and the antifas. I don't think any of us want to, be associated with that.
Well,
And neither of those are conservative nor liberal perspectives.
Thank
those
you.
are,
And
hate groups,
racism's
essentially.
racism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think there's a difference between hate groups and those who foster hate.
Yeah.
I think if you find the people, I'm going back to Louisiana because I just finished reading a book about Louisiana, but that, what you talked about, wanting the slower paced kind of life where you have more sense of community, that's what we have in common with them. They want that too. That's what they want. What we want is what they want. Having more control of our lives, being able to spend more time with our families, being able to take care of our own, having a community around us that is not getting uprooted all the time. These are the things that we're longing for.
Well, I think that you just you're aiming for that vibration, and maybe you got it because I felt it. That is, what are the commonalities of human beings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have locked ourselves into this hypnosis of where and I sometimes I wonder if the progressive side is supposedly the more educated and intelligent and everything, doesn't even like allow somebody a slightly more old-fashioned perspective, as if it's like an imposition of traditional people are all over the earth, and some of them are Americans.
Who says progressives are more educated or somehow saner than?
All right, one more. All right.
I like some of what you're talking about in terms of all of us taking a pause during our lives, right? During you said on the weekend, right? For music, for getting outside, getting in the park, getting to know each other.
Done, of course.
It is, but because I think our culture generally in America, and certainly true in Marin, is very kind of driven by earning the money, right? As we talked about, it's part of the story of America, right? If you're not working super hard, you have a lot of challenges and a lot of problems, something's maybe wrong with you, right? You're not quite a go-getter.
Well, there's not too many people on Sundays chasing money. Marin. They're just leading those busy lives.
My point is that everyone needs that break and get out of the cycle of being amped up, right? And everyone's kind of so busy and almost running on adrenaline, right? Whether you're watching the news and getting all fired up about that, or you're doing your work, whatever it is, people are really amped up. And I think being able to slow down, which is easier in smaller communities or rural communities, like even West Marin, right? People, you can feel just the vibration is just more mellow. It's just more chill. And every time I go out there, you know, because you live out there, it feels like a much more sane and human way of being.
Can I just bring that back? I don't mean to be cruel, or again to the 1980s when that immigration bill passed, and the level came up to $1 million a year. For the last 30 years. Beautiful, wonderful people. I'm not suggesting some apocalyptic thing for anybody, though I think we're all living as if we're walking off to some, like we don't care by our actions, but I'm going on. There's something called deep
from the Green New Deal.
There's something called deep ecology. I don't know exactly what that means, but there's certain people who get out more. They don't need to be riding a mountain bike and crashing through things. No offense to you mountain bikers, love you all, Salin, Sierra included. But I mean, there's some level of people who get visceral, like kind of get their feet wet in nature and are aware that nature is impacted everywhere, everywhere we go. And to me, that's sort of like a sense of deep ecology. Like you understand that in your attempt, you're trying to live a life that isn't part of that element.
It's near impossible in our society.
Well, not if this book about empty planet has come true, but if we can just be patient.
We live in these boxes, we turn our thermostat up, we turn our thermostat down with the air conditioner, we go to the store, we buy stuff in plastic, we wrap it in plastic, throw that in a plastic bag, throw that in another plastic bag, throw it in a landfill.
I don't know, we got a good vibration. We're human beings, all of us that's my lesson. If I got to stick my neck out and be the conservative idiot of Marin County just to try to make a statement, and I actually believe everything I believe everything I say, and believe me, it's even worse than it gets because this nutty agenda, it's unnecessary.
What's unnecessary?
Because it's involving millions of dollars when so much can just start roots level. This is just.
Well, what's going to kick off the grassroots change? I mean, is it going to be being up to our necks in water or 300-degree heat in the summer?
Yeah, it's already pretty bad.
I don't know.
Do you think the multinational corporations who now basically control most of the wealth have a better idea of how our communities should be?
No, of course not.
Well, then, what's your answer to that?
And the actual community.
Everyone just wakes up?
Then that's what we're trying.
That's what we're doing.
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, basically, this is a call to arms. It's a call to arms to mobilize people to take an ecological perspective for our economy that takes us back in touch with the natural environment. And instead of working against it and us against nature, we start learning from nature and working with nature to find a way of living that's more harmonious. That's what the Green New Deal really is about.
All right. Well, to me, it just feels like some kind of push that's almost connected to a kind of a bias that's being put out in the world that I think is blinding us to actual real creative thinking and even ecological thinking. It's sort of the sense that we must impose this change to make these things happen. And I believe personally that we have not engaged the ability of trusting or calling human beings, just as Jerry Brown with the water problem. We haven't done this. And I think that things that completely emanate out of freedom with people are magical. And I'm not saying that what you guys are doing isn't like, can indeed bring magic to people. It's just.
Yeah, I hear you. I felt this a little bit with the Green New Deal, and also there's another organization called Climate Mobilization, right? Is that what it's called, right? Climate Mobilization. The ones their part of their campaign is to actually encourage cities to declare a climate emergency. And that emergency actually allows them to actually implement certain policies that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do, or not move the process as quickly as.
Well, that sounds more frightening again to me.
It is, and Mike said.
I don't understand.
And my point. Let me finish my point, which is that
sorry.
I think that it can be a little heavy-handed. There is an emergency. There is a sense of urgency. You know, if you look everywhere, as you were saying earlier, you pay attention and you're empathetic with what's happening in the natural world. There is destruction and kind of degeneration happening everywhere, and more of what Wendy was talking about is more of what's called a regenerative approach, which is really helping to restore the vitality and the health and wellness of ecosystems and communities to actually to thrive and work in a more harmonious ways, more healthy ways, right? So
we're not separate from nature.
Yeah.
No,
we are
very,
very nature.
Exactly.
And I think that there is a balance between calling forth this need to say there is an urgent crisis here, we need to act collectively in some way, and yet also allowing it to be more of an organic, creative process that is more collaborative in nature and more kind of customized to what the community wants, based on what their own inputs are to make that change happen. But I think nonetheless, we need to act collectively, which involves a lot of individual actions that no one ever sees, right? Even beautiful things. Even if it's a grandmother taking care of grandkids, or a high schooler going to take care of an elderly person, or someone picking up trash as they're going hiking. All these little things are wonderful things that no one's mandated to be done, but they're all a part of helping to create a healthy community. So we want to encourage all of that and celebrate it, but also say, you know what, a lot of the actions we're doing right now, clearly there's a gap between what's needed and what's happening. We're moving in the right direction, but we're not moving fast enough.
Actually, the truth is, we're not moving in the right direction, and we're trying to change.
And the wrong direction was maybe where we're moving. And
EVs and solar.
What I hear from Guy a lot is just a fear of and a distrust of government and regulation and things outside of
being imposed.
And I got to say to Wendy, in terms of the corporations and all that, individuals are the lifeblood of the corporations. If we quit buying the stuff, we're taking away their lifeblood.
Yep.
So basically every waking dollar, everything that we buy and throw away is coming out of the living environments. And it's kind of, it comes down to the individual and our choices pretty much collectively. And we give our power to corporations.
Again.
Only if we do it
George
collectively.
Washington. That's exactly what George did. I was talking to Sierra about George last week too. He stopped primarily being a tobacco grower. Oh shit.
We're running out of time.
He had a look of like, what are they still doing in there?
Oh, for God's sakes.
What, is it done? Not recording?
I'm probably fired from this organization. Okay, we're done.
All right.
Is that already?
Wait a minute.
You sure?
Is it no longer
That's gonna be
recorded?
fade
We're
out.
just getting started.
All right,
Yeah.
All right. No,
I have
no,
to
we
go.
gotta go.
Yeah.